I just saw the numbers. I think it was 2 trips or something a week is what we guessed. Was that right? Is around 2 trips a week, 300 minutes a trip to get the firewood for a household of 5. You want to do brown rice? Oh, no, you don't. But it's better for you. You still don't want to do it. I don't understand. You don't want to spend another 5 hours collecting wood so that you can have brown rice? All right, so I think that's why you see white rice. I think it has much more to do with the experience you have on a camping trip with brown rice than it has the experience of what you see in your kitchen. Right? In my kitchen, I take a cup of this and I throw it in the rice thing. I take 2 1/4 cups of that. I push the button and I go read the New York Times and have a glass of wine. I don't care whether I come back in 20 minutes or 40 minutes. Doesn't matter to me. But take it out of the trail and you'll see it. So from the nutritional point of view, though, do you want white or brown? Yeah, okay. And what are you losing in the white? You're losing fiber, yeah. Are you also using a little bit of the kernel, a little bit of the protein? I think you are. I just think some of that goes too. Somebody who knows the right answer, they're welcome to tell me. So that's the answer for rice milling. We mill rice because milling rice is a substitute for cooking time. Peter Timmer, quite some time ago, created, as far as I know, one of the only examples of an isoquant. We actually do our business without ever drawing these isoquants. And Peter just did it directly. And he had actual techniques for milling rice. And so one way of milling rice is the way it was done from time immemorial. You got a smooth rock and another smooth rock, and you carefully banged on the rice, and the bran would come off, and that's how you got white rice. And of course, you break some of the rice kernels, which is not considered to be good. So that's hand pounding. And then there are different pieces of machinery, small mills, large mills, and then really industrial pieces of machinery that you can use to separate rice. And each of these things has a different amount of investment in US dollars and a different amount of labor required. And the output, in all cases, is 10 million rupees in value added. In other words, you take the price of the rice that comes out, you subtract off the price of the rice that comes in, that's value added. It's the value you added by milling it. So it's rice milling, not rice, that has the isoquant here. You get what you think. Hand pounding takes an awful lot of labor. It doesn't take very much in the way of equipment. And a large bulk facility takes a large amount of equipment and very little labor. And everything else is in between. And those are our techniques. Okay, so we just said value added. Here's value added again. Revenue minus cost of materials. And part of what's going on there is the hand-pounded rice is going to be worth less than the machine-done rice. One reason is the broken rice. And what's the other reason? Something else that you don't want broken. What don't you like to break when you eat? What? Because if you do rocks, little piece of rocks getting up. Ah! Right? So the rice that's done with a machine doesn't have that problem. You make a very, very clean product, as you know. Product you have at home, you barely have to wash anymore. In the old days, you would wash that. You'd be really careful about it because you're peeling out the stones and all kinds of other stuff. So value added. That's why he does value added. And here's the isoquant. So I just plotted it. Here's investment costs, and here's laborers. And I plot the points, and I connected them up. When I connect them up, I'm saying this point is I do make half my rice this way and half my rice that way. That's how I get points in between. So all the points in between are just a convex combination of the two techniques. Some of this and some of that. That's why I can just draw the straight lines. And that's my isoquant. Yeah? Now I have an isoquant, and I'm going to use that isoquant. Now I'm going to use it to find out what technique minimizes costs. Well, that depends an awful lot on what the price of labor is. And the way in which you get prices is a bit convoluted. The price of investment is 1 because I measured it in US dollars. So that's fine. I know this guy way up here on top, he costs about 80,000 US dollars to make 10 million rupees in value added in rice. Yeah, that's clear enough. This one down here uses 46 laborers, but I don't know what that costs. So I got to figure out what does 46 laborers cost. And the way we do it is we make some assumptions. Some assumptions are pretty funny when I think about it. The plant is assumed to last 50 years with no maintenance. Okay, tell me the likelihood of that. You like that assumption? No, okay. So you know right away something is, we don't quite have our prices right. So the price of the labor to go with it is the price of the labor for 50 years, because I want the two things the same. So I got 50 years worth of machinery, if it were done right, cost $80,000 for argument's sake. What does a laborer for 50 years cost? So I need to know how big a bank account do I have to establish today to pay the laborer for all 50 years. And that depends on what you think the interest rate is and what you think the wage rate is. The wage rates are, this is a long time ago, it's less than $1 a day, is it not? Yeah. But that's old time money, so that's around $2 or $3 today, equivalent, which is not a strange wage in a developing country. And that 24% is not a strange interest rate in a developing country. So if I had $833 in the proverbial bank, and I could invest it at 24% interest, it would produce $200 per year for 50 years. And so $833 is what 50 years of a laborer costs. And now I got apples to apples. I got dollars of investment that pay out over 50 years. I've got dollars going into labor that pay out over 50 years. So the two things are commensurate. Anyway, that's how you get the price. I hate to say it, but does anyone have a student loan? You're too early to have to pay them back, so you won't know. Otherwise, we would ask the Hillary Clinton question, who has the highest interest rate on their student loan, and whether or not they have developing country interest rates. And they do. Remember, you had budget constraints. Now I want to know equal outlay lines, called isocost lines. So I'm going to find a set of input bundles that cost the same. I don't know what the right level of cost is. That's the unknown. I do know the level of output. I don't know what that output will cost to make. But it's just a straight line. Yeah. The outlay is 1, because that's the price of capital, times the amount of capital, plus 833 times the amount of labor. Everything on that line, every K and L on that line costs E. They all cost the same. So I could write that generally. I've written it as the outlay equals the price of the first good times the amount plus the price of the second good times the amount. Here I have capital and labor. Often I'll have good one, good two. It doesn't really matter. Now I have my straight line again. And I do the same things with the straight line that I did in consumer theory. I take whichever thing I'm going to put on the vertical axis, and I solve for it. So the second line there is just my straight line again, right? And it says the amount of capital equals the intercept, E over the price of capital. In our example, PK is 1, makes life really easy, minus L times PL over PK. And that's the slope-intercept form. The slope being PL over PK with a minus sign. So let's look at several of these lines. You can go back and look at the slide if you want, but I'm just going to narrate it. Here are 3 lines, and they're parallel. If they're parallel, do they have the same prices? Or at least the same price ratios, technically. But I've set PK equal to 1, so they have the same prices. So all 3 of these lines have the same prices. Since PK is 1, every bundle on this line costs about how much? 30 says 35,000. Do you see how he got it? I don't see how he got it. Just right? It's the intercept, right? Slope-intercept form. This is E over PK is E over 1. E is the outlay. So everything up here is 35,000. So for instance, hand pounding costs, rough numbers, 35,000 for 50 years of it. Okay? Let's look at this one. This one cost 15? Close enough? Is there any way when spending $15,000 to make the output? No, right? This line's under the isoquant. So lines under the isoquant are cheap, but they don't work. You can't make the output. Lines up here are expensive. What about this tangent line? That's the least cost way of making the output. So the middle line, the middle color blue, is tangent to the red dot at this technique here. Right? And that's a small mill. So what is the least cost way of pounding rice? You just read it off the diagram. It's a small mill. And that is the answer to our question. With our prices, the least cost way is to operate there. If you operate here instead, it will be more expensive. You can even tell how much more expensive. 20 to 10, $15,000 more expensive. For a long time period, it's still $15,000. So small rice mill costs least. And that is exactly what we do with this model. This is our cost model. We have an isoquant. I'll give you a second. We have an isoquant. The isoquant tells us what's possible. We draw a set of iso cost lines. We find the lowest iso cost line that still is touching the isoquant. That would be the tangency. And that is the least cost way of producing. Okay. Yeah. It's not tangent. It's not tangent. It just goes through it. So this is the only tangency. I just drew it. I can draw another line on this diagram as I will. I mean, an interesting line would be one that goes through a technique, but so long as I can draw parallel, if I can draw it all, come on, oh, there we go. Right, so I can draw another parallel line, right? And now, since this parallel line goes through this point, every point on this parallel line costs about 49,000. So in particular, that costs 49,000, and well, it doesn't anywhere else, right? But I can draw as many of those as I want. I can draw them anywhere I want, as long as I have the right slope. And then I can price any technique or any point on the isoquant. But the interesting one's this one. This is unique. This is the least cost technique. Yeah? So that's the one that's unique. That's what we're trying to find. Now I tell you a story. Once upon a time, widows used to hand pound rice in Indonesia. Are widows the richest or poorest people in a society? Yeah, unless we're talking about the United States, we're talking about like 80-year-olds, right? But generally, poorest is the right answer in a developing country. So very poor people made their living sitting there all day with a rock. And then people realized that's not the least cost way of doing it. If we use a small rice mill, then we can produce rice cheaper than the widows can. If we produce it cheaper, what's going to happen to the widow's hand pounding business? It's gone, right? You know, if you're out there producing something, someone will start doing it cheaper, it's gone. And so the widows get put out of business, and economics triumphs, Peter Timmer says. Can you imagine what the comment on this article was? What? Those poor widows, right? I mean, is it a good comment or a bad comment? I mean, I can defend Peter's point of view. Let me give you the defense, and then you should attack me. You should not let this go quietly. Here's the cost. It's 20,000. Here's the cost of hand pounding. It's 15,000. Who's going to pay this difference? Guess what? This is Indonesia. People who consume rice. Are people who consume rice in Indonesia poor or rich? Well, everyone's poor, basically. So if you force rice to be hand pounded so as to give the widows employment, then you're putting a burden of $15,000 upon other poor people. That's Peter Timmer's defense. But now let's hear more of the offense. Right, somebody can stand up for them? Yes, sir.
Is the cost to the widows, is that outweighed by the benefit
to the moderately poor?
Yes.
I don't know. And guess what? Mr. Timmer didn't know either, because he never asked the question. Now, I've lived in 2 societies where you can interchange the people. I spent 2 years in Sweden. You can take any Swede, grab her by her hair, drop her in America. She will function perfectly. I can grab any one of you and drop them there. Within 2 weeks, you'll function perfectly. And they have completely polar attitudes there. The minimum wage in Sweden is large. The minimum effective wage is really large. You will live in an apartment. It will not necessarily be luxurious, but it will not be open to the air. There will not be rats. There will be heat. at minus 20, there better be heat. You will have healthcare, and you'll have exactly the same healthcare that everyone else gets. Yeah, if you work for a private firm, you might cut your waiting time for some procedures by a little bit. But basically, the things you care about were identical. Kids will go to the same schools potentially. One diet will have a little more meat in it than the other. One person will spend more time at the bar than the other, right? And that's a high-wage society. And we're a low-wage society. So we have really cheap food. And when my friends come here, we definitely go out drinking because what would cost $500 there will cost us $50 here and so on and so forth. So there are some very different attitudes. But their attitude towards unemploying people, you'll find is very shocking. Their attitude is they would have gone for the small rice mill in a minute. But then they would have found a way to pay or employ the people pushed out. Where our experience is if you push someone out, the system will eventually gobble them back up, but it might take years. In their system, and a good example is they had a mine up near Kiruna, and the mine was old and not efficient, and they had to decide whether to make it efficient. Efficient meant a lot of people would be unemployed, and they held their breath and they decided they would make it efficient, and the people who were unemployed got paid like 80% until they found a new job. And so they managed to keep the best of both. But there's a problem. It's not obvious that sending the widows off into the world is a great idea. Which is why you should go and do those dance classes, because it uses up labor and it doesn't use up carbon.